In the bleak winter of 1959, a small group of young adventurers gathered in the northern reaches of the Soviet Union, about to set off on a journey that they knew would be unforgettable. Eventually, this journey became one of the most famous journeys in history, but not for the reasons you think. What started as a bold skiing expedition would spiral into a baffling tragedy that left experts and ordinary people alike wondering, what exactly happened to these people? This is the case of the Dyatlov Pass incident. Welcome to Fridays with Tony, where we explore mysteries that are unusual, unsettling, and often unsolved. I'm Tony, and every other Friday we have new stories to unravel with you. Like and subscribe to be sure you don't miss any of our intriguing tales. Today's story involves a group of experienced hikers on an ill-fated expedition. 10 people came together to form a group of experienced hikers, all of whom were in their early 20s and were students at Ural Polytechnic Institute. These hikers had a 14-day trek ahead of them, after which they were going to reach Otorten. But the idea of this journey was started by one man, Igor Alexeyevich Dyatlov. Dyatlov was a 23-year-old radio engineering student at the same institute, an ambitious soul with a thirst for exploration. Together with his group, they set out to conquer the northern Urals, a region as unforgiving as it was majestic in the Sverdlovsk Oblast. Dyatlov had meticulously assembled this group, each chosen for their endurance, experience, and camaraderie. Among them were 8 men and 2 women, all young, vibrant, and eager for the challenges of winter trekking in the Soviet wilderness. They were not novices. Each had earned their reputation as a grade 2 hiker with extensive experience in ski tours across difficult terrain, a credential that spoke to their skills and resilience. This expedition, however, would be their final test. Yes, the stakes were high. If they successfully completed the journey, they would receive the prestigious Grade 3 certification, a mark of achievement that only the most accomplished hikers in the Soviet Union could boast. For these young people, the expedition was a passage into a higher echelon of adventurers, and they could never imagine not giving it their best. The journey was symbolic too, echoing the Soviet Union's push toward achievement and strength. The group called their expedition the 21st Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, a title as grand as their ambitions. It was a journey that required grit, precision, and resolve, as they would be traversing some 300 kilometers across treacherous landscapes, battling icy winds and dense snow, with only their skill and each other to rely on. By January 23rd, the plan was set. The Sverdlovsk City Committee of Physical Culture and Sport approved their course, a pathway snaking through mountains and valleys toward a forbidding peak called Otorten. It was a peak with an ominous reputation among the indigenous Mansi people. The very name meant, "Don't go there," a foreboding warning of the dangers that lurked in its shadow. Undeterred, the group accepted the challenge. They were young and brimming with confidence, believing they could conquer the mountain's mysteries. Among the 10 members was Semyon Zolotaryov, who joined only at the last minute. An experienced hiker himself, Zolotaryov was familiar with rigorous routes. He was scheduled to join a different, equally perilous expedition, but ended up with the student group. On January 25th, they boarded a train and began the journey north, arriving in the quiet town of Ivdel in the early morning hours. From Ivdel, they continued by truck to Vizhai, the last inhabited settlement before the wilderness swallowed them whole. Vizhai marked the end of the known world. Beyond its borders, only vast expanses of snow and ice lay in wait. Here, surrounded by desolate beauty, the hikers made their final preparations. Their spirits were high, buoyed by the excitement of the unknown. But as they left Vizhai on January 27th, a sense of isolation settled over them. They were headed into the heart of winter's icy grip. And whatever awaited them on Otorten was now theirs to face, alone. On January 28th, just a day into the trek, Ural, one of the 10, felt the unforgiving bite of his chronic health issues, ailments that he had struggled with for years, aching joints, rheumatism, a congenital heart defect, had flared up, making every step a battle. Reluctantly, he made the painful decision to turn back, parting from his friends with a heavy heart. The remaining 9 pushed onward, their pace steady and determined as they moved through the harsh terrain. Snow fell relentlessly, blanketing the world around them. They shared several moments of laughter, struggle, and camaraderie during their journey. Finally, they reached the edge of a highland area on January 31st, where they decided to cache some of their food and equipment, leaving it behind for the return journey. It was a strategic decision, one that spoke to their skill and understanding of the challenges that lay ahead. Now, as they pressed onward, the route grew even more treacherous, the biting wind cutting through their thick clothing like knives. The weather worsened. The group veered west, unknowingly drifting off course toward Kolatsiakl, a peak the local Mansi people referred to as Dead Mountain. With each step, they moved closer to the mystery that would soon consume them. Though they were unaware of the ominous path they had taken, perhaps they had felt the weight of the mountain's silence, the way the wind howled through the frozen valleys, like a distant, mournful wail. But if they did, they chose to ignore it, setting up camp on the slope, exposed to the elements. Setting up camp on the side of Kolatsiakl was a curious decision. They could have descended slightly, where the forest offered some shelter from the raging storm, but they chose the slope. Dyatlov probably wanted to preserve the altitude they had gained, unwilling to lose ground they had fought so hard for. But there's another possibility. Maybe he simply saw this as an opportunity to challenge themselves further, practicing their skills in extreme conditions. Whatever reason it was, it didn't matter, because this decision would end up being their last. Here's what went down. The group had intended to send a telegram back to their sports club upon reaching the settlement of Vizhai, marking their successful return. February 12th was their expected deadline, but Dyatlov had told Ural, the only member who had turned back early due to illness, that he anticipated delays. Such minor setbacks were typical of these winter expeditions after all, and no one thought much of it when February 12th came and went in silence. But as the days stretched into a week, and then another, concern turned to dread. There was no word from Dyatlov or any of the other people in the group. Where had they all disappeared? It wasn't until February 20th, when the families of the missing hikers demanded answers, that the alarm was raised. What had begun as a daring adventure for the young hikers now spurred a rescue mission involving volunteer students and teachers from the Institute. Soon the Soviet military joined in, adding helicopters and planes to sweep over the rugged, snowbound landscape of the northern Urals. But the search would yield more questions than answers, leading those involved down a dark path fraught with fear, confusion, and unanswered mysteries. 6 days later, on February 26th, one of the search teams stumbled upon the group's campsite. What they saw chilled them to the bone, even more than the biting cold. Their tent was battered and torn, barely standing against the snow. It looked as though it had been slashed open from the inside, a jagged opening carved by hands desperate to escape something within. Mikhail Sharavin, a student on the rescue team, recalled the eerie scene. The tent, half buried in snow, all their belongings abandoned inside. There were boots, clothing, and food left behind, all the essentials of survival scattered, as if the hikers had fled in a mad rush. And outside the tent in the snow, they found 9 sets of footprints. Strangely, some were made by bare feet or socks, while others showed just a single shoe. The tracks led away from the tent, trailing toward a nearby forest in a quiet line, as if the group had walked, not run, into the darkness. The footprints vanished under a fresh layer of snow roughly 500 meters from the tent. But searchers followed the path to the forest's edge, where a large Siberian pine stood like a silent sentinel. Beneath the tree, they found the remains of a small fire and the bodies of two of the hikers, Yuri Krivonashenko and Georgy Doroshenko. They were shoeless, dressed only in their underwear, lying on the frozen ground near the faint remnants of a fire that had burned briefly and sputtered out. Their hands were scraped and raw, as if they had tried to climb the pine, perhaps to catch a glimpse of their abandoned camp in the distance. The branches above them were snapped up to 5 meters high, hinting that one of the hikers had indeed climbed the tree, frantically clawing for something or someone lost in the night. The horrors continued. Between the pine tree and the tent, spaced out like fallen soldiers, were 3 more bodies: Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. Each was positioned in a way that suggested that they had been struggling to return to the tent. Dyatlov, the leader, was found lying face up in the snow, his arms stretched forward, as if reaching toward an unseen destination. Kolmogorova had collapsed some distance from him, her face bruised and contorted in pain. Slobodin's body bore a small fracture in his skull, though it didn't appear to be fatal. He lay still further from the tent, his path zigzagging, in what seemed to be a desperate attempt to survive. For weeks, the searchers combed through the snow-laden woods, braving fierce winds and temperatures that hovered around minus 30 degrees Celsius. But it wasn't until May 4th, 2 months after the initial discovery, that they uncovered the final 4 bodies. They were found under 4 meters of snow, buried in a ravine deeper in the forest, 75 meters further from the pine tree. These hikers were dressed more warmly than the others, suggesting they had scavenged clothing from their fallen comrades to stave off the bitter cold. Lyudmila Dubanina was found wearing Krivonashenko's torn and burned trousers, and her left foot was wrapped in part of a jacket, as if she had fashioned makeshift protection against the elements. But their efforts were in vain, and the elements had exacted their price. An investigation began swiftly after the discovery of the first bodies, and the findings only deepened the mystery. The initial autopsies on Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and the others suggested that they had died of hypothermia, succumbing to the relentless cold of the Siberian night. But something was amiss. Rustem Slobodin's skull fracture hinted at a blunt force injury, yet the medical examiners concluded it was not severe enough to have killed him. These findings, while strange, paled in comparison to what was revealed about the 4 hikers found in May. 3 of them, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Lyudmila Dubanina, and Semen Zolotaryov, had sustained injuries so violent that one expert compared the impact to that of a car crash. Thibault-Brignol's had severe skull damage, while Dubanina and Zolotaryov bore massive chest fractures. Yet eerily, none of them had external wounds to match these injuries. It was as if their bones had shattered from within, crushed by an immense force no human hand could wield. The haunting details didn't stop there. Dubanina's body was missing her tongue, eyes, and parts of her face, a grotesque revelation that sent shivers through even the seasoned investigators. Zolotaryov, too, was found without his eyeballs, and another hiker, Alexander Kolevatov, had lost his eyebrows. Initially, forensic experts suspected that these injuries had occurred post-mortem, possibly due to the body's prolonged exposure to the elements in the stream bed where they were discovered. But the unsettling nature of the injuries left many questions unanswered, fueling wild speculation and deepening the air of mystery that shrouded the tragedy. The investigation quickly veered into strange territory. Some speculated that the indigenous Mansi people, who lived in the Ural Mountains as reindeer herders, had attacked the group for trespassing on sacred land. Yet the evidence contradicted this theory. The tracks leading away from the tent were only those of the hikers themselves, with no signs of a struggle or pursuit. The autopsies revealed no wounds from knives or other weapons, and the scattered bodies bore no evidence of a physical altercation. So what could have driven 9 experienced hikers to flee their shelter into sub-zero temperatures, barefoot and half-dressed? Why had some been found wrapped in torn fragments of each other's clothing, as if, in their final moments, they had scavenged whatever warmth they could find? Adding to the mystery, traces of radiation were detected on some of the victims' clothing. This discovery raised more questions than it answered, sparking theories of secret military tests or nuclear fallout that had gone unnoticed by the public. As the inquiry progressed, the evidence seemed to lead nowhere. Journalists covering the case reported that parts of the inquest files stated the following: 6 of the group members had died of hypothermia, while 3 had succumbed to their violent injuries. No other human footprints were found on Kolatsiakl. The tent had been sliced open from within, and all 9 hikers had left the campsite of their own volition. Adding to the puzzle, their final meal had been eaten only 6 to 8 hours before they met their end, and the searchers found no trace of outside interference. The official conclusion seemed almost as enigmatic as the mystery itself. The Soviet authorities claimed that an unknown, compelling force had caused the deaths, leaving it to the public to interpret what that might mean. The case was officially closed in May 1959, with the files locked away in a classified archive, as though the tragedy was something best forgotten. But the Dyatlov Pass incident was far from forgotten. Decades later, the mystery remained, capturing the imaginations of researchers, journalists, and conspiracy theorists alike. In 1997, an investigator's daughter donated the negatives from one of the hikers' cameras to the Dyatlov Foundation, revealing haunting images of the hikers in their final days. In 2018, Semyon Zolotaryev's body was exhumed for DNA testing, but the results only muddied the waters further. Some experts claimed his injuries matched those seen in victims of high-speed impacts, while the DNA analysis cast doubt on his identity. Was he truly Zolotaryev, or had someone assumed his name after World War II? In February 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation, narrowing their focus to 3 possibilities: an avalanche, a slab avalanche, or a hurricane. They ruled out foul play. Eyewitnesses in nearby areas had reported strange orange spheres in the sky on the night of the tragedy. The sightings continued in the weeks that followed. Theories of secret tests, military cover-ups, and extraterrestrial involvement fueled discussions. But each explanation seemed as elusive as the mystery itself. Let's start with 20-year-old Lyudmila Dubinina, who was born in 1938 on Kagostrov Island and grew up in a logging town before her family relocated for her father's work. A skilled athlete and hiker, she endured an accidental gunshot on a previous trek as well. Known for her leadership, she joined the Dyatlov group in 1959, but her final journey to Dead Mountain ended in tragedy. Her body was found kneeling, as if praying, with horrific injuries, sparking ongoing mystery. Then there was 21-year-old Yuri Doroshenko, born January 29, 1938, who is a spirited fourth-year engineering student at UPI. He was renowned for his impulsive bravery, famously confronting a bear with only a geology hammer. Known for his romance with Zina Kolmogorova, they later parted amicably, though Yuri remained close to her and Igor Dyatlov. Coming from a poor background, Yuri was always underdressed for the cold. Next, born on January 12, 1937 in Cheremkovo, USSR, was 22-year-old Zina Kolmogorova. She was a dedicated radio engineering major and a fifth-year student at UPI. Known as the engine of the university, Zina's vibrant energy and kindness endeared her to everyone. An experienced hiker with 8 expeditions, she once endured a viper bite without complaint. She was close to Igor Dyatlov and thus decided to join his final trek. 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, born January 13, 1936, was a skilled radio engineering student and the determined leader of the ill-fated Dyatlov expedition. Known for his inventive spirit, he crafted a radio used on hikes and a small stove for warmth. A natural leader with remarkable physical strength and a balanced character, Igor commanded respect, often seen guiding others with patience. Igor's life ended on the tragic expedition, leaving behind a legacy of courage and camaraderie. 23-year-old Rustem Slobodin, born January 11, 1936, was a quiet, athletic graduate of UPI who worked at Enterprise P.O. Box 10. Known as Rustic, he carried a mandolin on hikes and was a skilled long-distance runner. In 1958, he and his father completed a daring 300-kilometer trek through the remote Tian Shan Mountains, facing cultural divides and challenges. His resilience and courage left a lasting impression. Then there was 23-year-old Nikolai Kolya Thibault Brignoles, born June 5, 1935, who faced a difficult childhood under the shadow of his father's imprisonment during Stalin's repressions. Raised in Osiniki, where his father served in the Gulag, Kolya's family endured hardship. Despite these challenges, he thrived academically, joining UPI's construction department and graduating in 1958. A respected hiker, known for his humor and resilience, Kolya led multiple expeditions. 23-year-old Georgy Yuri Krivonoshenko, born January 7, 1935, was known for his lively spirit and boundless humor. A close friend of Igor Dyatlov, Yuri joined nearly all of Dyatlov's expeditions. He graduated in construction and hydraulics from UPI in 1957 and later worked at Chelyabinsk 40, where he witnessed the Kishtim disaster, a radioactive leak. Despite his knowledge, traces of radioactivity were later found on his clothing. Tragically, Yuri died just before his 24th birthday. 24-year-old Alexander Sasha Kolevatov, born November 16, 1934, faced early hardship when his family relocated to Tavda due to his father's role in the Gulag, providing modest safety amidst war. Though poor and often struggling, Sasha excelled in German, joining the Komsomol, later securing a position in a Moscow secret institute, and later returning to Sverdlovsk. Known for his intellect and resilience, he celebrated his final birthday on January 30th, 1959, days before tragically dying in the Ural Mountains. 38-year-old Semyon Sasha Zolotaryov, born February 2nd, 1921, was the eldest and most enigmatic member of the Dyatlov group. A World War II veteran, he endured the front lines with a rare 3% survival rate, earning multiple awards. After several thwarted attempts at a military career, he became a tourism instructor. Known for his tattoos and mysterious past, he joined Dyatlov's group, dying under strange circumstances on his 38th birthday. His body was exhumed in 2018 as no official cemetery records or family confirmations existed for his burial. Lastly, 21-year-old Yuri Yudin, born in 1937, became widely known as the sole survivor of the Dyatlov expedition of February 1959. Due to an inflamed sciatic nerve, Yudin was forced to return, leaving his 9 friends, including close companions Lyudmila Dubinina and Igor Dyatlov, to face a mysterious death. Haunted by survivor's guilt, Yudin spent years pondering theories, including military testing, and held on to the teddy bear Lyudmila gifted him as a reminder of the people he lost. He lived a long life and passed away on April 27, 2013, at the age of 75, still haunted by unanswered questions. Yuri Kuntsevich was just a young boy of 12 when he attended the funerals of 5 of the hikers who had perished under bewildering circumstances. The memory of that day never left him. He would later recount an odd detail that had etched itself deeply into his mind. The bodies of the hikers bore an unnatural deep brown tan, a haunting mark that would linger in the stories and speculations surrounding their demise. Little did young Yuri know that this would be a pivotal moment, drawing him into a lifelong quest to uncover the truth behind the deaths of the Dyatlov expedition, a mystery that would take him from mourner to the head of the Dyatlov Foundation. As the years passed, Kuntsevich would come to realize that he was not alone in his curiosity. Many others, scattered far and wide, felt the same gnawing urge to understand what had happened that fateful night. Strangely enough, on the very night of the incident, a group of hikers stationed roughly 50 kilometers south of Dyatlov's team reported seeing strange orange spheres hovering in the northern sky. These lights, like distant beacons of some otherworldly power, cast an eerie glow against the stark whiteness of the snow, as if marking the unseen boundaries of something terrifying. The orange orbs lingered for hours, illuminating the otherwise dark expanse, before disappearing without a trace. At first, the sighting was dismissed as a coincidence, but soon similar reports flooded in from Ivdel and nearby areas. Witnesses, including members of the military and the local meteorology service, recounted sightings of the glowing spheres that hovered in the frigid air, coming and going throughout February and March of 1959. They painted an unsettling picture that seemed to echo a silent, watchful presence. Yet no official record acknowledged their existence until years later, when witnesses finally spoke out. Over the years, theories surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident grew like a dark forest around the tragedy. In 1990, Anatoly Gushchin compiled his own research in a book ominously titled "The Price of State Secrets is 9 Lives." Gushchin's book was a mosaic of disturbing conjectures, and it quickly attracted criticism. Many felt it leaned too heavily into speculative theories, particularly the notion that the hikers had stumbled upon a top-secret Soviet weapon test. Nonetheless, the book touched a nerve, sparking public interest and opening the case to a new generation of truth-seekers. With each new revelation, whispers of hidden agendas and government cover-ups emerged, and more people who had stayed silent for 30 years finally spoke up, adding new fragments to the puzzle. One such voice was that of Lev Nikitich Ivanov, the investigator who had originally led the 1959 inquiry into the tragedy. 30 years later, in a shocking confession, Ivanov admitted that his team had been left without a rational explanation for the incident. He went on to reveal a startling detail that had been deliberately omitted from the final report. He and his team had seen the same flying spheres over the area. According to Ivanov, high-ranking regional officials had quickly issued orders to suppress this detail, urging him to leave no room for questions about the inexplicable lights. Ivanov's admission sent shockwaves through those who had long been captivated by the mystery, fueling suspicion that an unseen hand was at work, cloaking the tragedy in secrecy. As the mystery grew, so did the public's hunger for answers. In 2000, a regional television network decided to reopen the case in the form of a documentary titled "The Mystery of Dyatlov Pass." The project brought together an eclectic mix of filmmakers, researchers, and writers, including Yekaterinburg author Anna Matveyeva. Inspired by the tragedy, Matveyeva published a novella of the same name, intertwining real accounts, official case files, and imagined scenarios to bring the story to life. Through her narrative, she portrayed a modern-day woman, an alter ego of herself, desperately trying to piece together the events of 1959. Matveyeva's work, while fictional, became one of the most comprehensive sources of information on the incident, as it included copious quotations from the case files entries from the hikers' diaries, and interviews with those who had witnessed the aftermath. Her book, combined with the raw footage and accounts collected by the documentary crew, brought the Dyatlov mystery into the public consciousness like never before. The renewed interest in the case prompted Kuntsevich to establish the Dyatlov Foundation in 1999 with the support from the Ural State Technical University. The foundation, under Kuntsevich's passionate leadership, was dedicated to unraveling the truth about the incident and preserving the memory of the hikers who had perished. They even opened the Dyatlov Museum, a quiet space filled with artifacts from the fateful expedition, where the echoes of the past lingered in every corner. Then, in 2016, a memorial plaque was erected in Solikamsk in honor of Yuri Yudin, the sole survivor of the Dyatlov group, who had passed away in 2013. The plaque stood as a solemn reminder of the lives lost and the lingering questions that refused to fade. Years passed, yet the mystery remained, captivating the imagination of skeptics, scientists, and conspiracy theorists alike. In July 2020, Andrei Kuryakov, a high-ranking official from the Prosecutor General's office, announced an official conclusion that an avalanche had been responsible for the Dyatlov group's deaths. Kuryakov's claim was later supported by a computer simulation from Swiss researchers, who reasoned that a snow slab would have made ominous cracking noises as it slid across the tent, prompting the hikers to make a hasty escape. Kuryakov believed that every action the hikers took after abandoning their tent was logical and consistent with seasoned skiers seeking safety. They had moved toward lower ground to avoid the potential threat, attempted to start a fire, and even dug a snow cave for shelter. Yet, paradoxically, it was their experience and knowledge of the mountain's dangers that sealed their fate. Perhaps, had they been less experienced, they might have chosen to stay and dig out of the tent, surviving the night instead of meeting their doom in the bitter cold. But even with the avalanche theory's backing, not everyone was convinced. Benjamin Radford, an American skeptic, reviewed an alternative explanation, rooted in an avalanche scenario. He theorized that the hikers had cut their way out of the tent in a panic, either because snow had blocked the entrance or because they feared an impending slide. Fleeing into the night, they split into groups, trying desperately to survive. Some built a fire, burning their hands in the process, while others, disoriented in the darkness, attempted to return to the tent for supplies. Their tragic fate was compounded by the bone-chilling cold, which left them separated and vulnerable. The injuries found on the bodies were attributed to the crushing weight of snow. And as for Dubinina's missing tongue, Radford speculated that scavengers had taken advantage of the cold silence. However, the contradictions to the avalanche theory lingered, leaving room for doubts and debates. No clear signs of an avalanche were visible at the site. An avalanche of the necessary magnitude would have likely left debris scattered across the area and caused severe, widespread injuries. Yet the bodies found within a month of the incident were covered by only a shallow layer of snow. Furthermore, the region had hosted numerous expeditions before and after the Dyatlov incident, with none reporting avalanche risks in that area. Studies of the slope suggested that it was unlikely to allow an avalanche, especially one that would curve in a way to strike the tent. In 2015, an inquiry by the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation set out to unearth answers that had long been elusive, hoping to shed new light on a tragedy cloaked in speculation and fear. The findings revealed chilling details of the night the group met their end, but they also invited fresh speculation, as though every new revelation stirred another layer of the enigma. The committee's investigation, led by seasoned experts, some of whom had navigated perilous mountain terrain themselves, pointed to nature's merciless hand. Yet their findings did not erase the mystery, but instead painted a picture as terrifying as any ghost story. The inquiry suggested that the night had been as ruthless as it was cold. The wind howled over the barren slope of Kolatsiakl at hurricane speeds, reaching a deafening 67 miles per hour, while temperatures plummeted to a brutal 40 degrees below zero. Snowstorms swirled around the mountain, and frost bit into every exposed surface. The original investigators, arriving 3 weeks after the incident, had encountered a site transformed, its deadly clues blanketed in new snow, softened by time. What they missed, however, was the terrifying reality of that night, a night that the ICRF would reconstruct in grim detail. On February 1st, the hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, reached the treacherous slopes of Kolatsiakl, a mountain whose name meant Dead Mountain in the language of the native Mansi people. Despite the foreboding name and brutal weather, the group set up camp in an exposed area with no natural shelter. Heavy snow blanketed the landscape, weighing down on the mountain as if waiting for the slightest misstep. It was an unwise choice, but perhaps Dyatlov underestimated the force of nature. The group's digging and movement on the slope weakened the snowpack. The mountain lay quiet, patient, as the hikers drifted into an uneasy sleep within their tent. Then came the silence before the storm, the kind of stillness that only the mountains can hold. Under the mounting weight, the snow above them began to shift, inching down the slope like a slow, quiet threat. In the dark, a slight rumble may have disturbed their sleep, alerting them to something wrong. Suddenly, the snow pressed against the tent, trapping the hikers inside. Panic erupted. In those moments, survival instincts overruled reason. Knowing they couldn't reach the tent's entrance, they cut their way out with knives, clawing through the fabric and into the frigid night. The wind howled mercilessly as they stumbled into the snow, barely dressed for the brutal cold. Their bodies were vulnerable, exposed to the relentless elements as they struggled through the blizzard. Some managed to grab a few garments, while others stepped into the night in nothing more than their pajamas, frost biting at their skin with every second. Disoriented and panicked, they descended the slope, seeking refuge in the forest nearly a mile away, hoping to escape the impending avalanche. Splitting into smaller groups, they took different paths in search of safety. 2 of them, barely clothed, reached a large Siberian pine. They huddled near a small fire that sputtered in the snow, its faint glow swallowed by the shadows. The fire flickered briefly, but it could not compete with the wind's fury or the night's chill. It was here that the rescuers would later find their bodies, skin bare and burnt from their desperate attempts to warm their hands against the fire, but ultimately claimed by the cold. 3 others, Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin, tried to retrace their steps back to the tent, perhaps in a final attempt to retrieve their sleeping bags or some last bit of warmth. The deep snow clung to their legs, making each step more difficult than the last. They collapsed at various intervals, succumbing one by one to exhaustion and hypothermia, each found later frozen in the silent snow, as though reaching toward a place they could never return to. It took months to locate the remaining 4, buried deep in a ravine 70 meters beyond the forest's edge. They lay concealed beneath meters of snow. They had worn more clothing, scavenged from those who had fallen first, wrapping their bodies in the remnants of their companions' garments. But even this was not enough. Investigators speculated that the group might have tried to create a new shelter, but in their desperation, they slipped into a snow hole above a hidden stream. When their bodies were finally recovered, they bore injuries so severe that the forensic team compared them to those sustained in a car crash. The ICRF concluded that a combination of brutal weather, inexperience, and misjudgment led the group to their fate. Yet the answers did little to quiet the rumors. Negligence by the original investigators, who arrived late and missed key details, left gaps that conspiracy theories rushed to fill. As time passed, the story seemed to gain weight, absorbing new speculations and new voices, each one echoing into the void left by the tragedy. In 2021, physicists and engineers conducted a new study, hoping to resolve the mystery once and for all. Their findings pointed to a terrifying but plausible explanation: a small slab avalanche. Even a modest snowslide could exert immense pressure, crushing bones and inflicting injuries as severe as those found on the hikers. It was a quiet killer, one that the team might never have seen coming until it was too late. Yet, nature offered other, stranger possibilities. In 2019, a Swedish-Russian expedition proposed that the hikers had fallen victim to a rare but deadly phenomenon: the katabatic wind. Such winds, capable of speeds so intense they could tear through the night like invisible predators, were known to exist in regions with similar topography. In Sweden, decades earlier, a group of hikers had been killed by a sudden burst of katabatic wind, leaving behind a tragedy eerily similar to Dyatlov's group. In the case of the Dyatlov hikers, this wind would have swept down upon them with little warning, leaving them no choice but to flee. According to the expedition's findings, the hikers might have covered the tent with snow, hoping to find it later and navigate back after the wind subsided. A flashlight found atop the tent, still shining dimly, seemed to support this theory, but survival was elusive, slipping through their fingers as they built makeshift shelters that collapsed, claiming more lives. Adding another layer to the mystery, author Donnie Eicher proposed in his 2013 book Dead Mountain that the wind itself was to blame, not through physical force, but through sound. He speculated that the wind had created a Kármán vortex street, a phenomenon that generates infrasound capable of inducing extreme panic and disorientation. Under the influence of this eerie, low-frequency hum, the hikers may have fled the tent in horror, only regaining their senses too late, stranded in the dark, and unable to find their way back. Then there was a darker theory: the suggestion that the hikers had stumbled upon a covert military test site. Some speculated that Soviet parachute mines, exploding mid-air, created powerful concussive blasts that could inflict deadly internal injuries while leaving minimal external wounds. Indeed, glowing orange orbs had been sighted in the sky by witnesses, possibly linked to military aircraft or test bombs. According to this theory, the hikers, caught in the path of an accidental test, had fled their tent in a panic, only to succumb to the bitter cold and the horrific injuries inflicted by these unexplained forces. Theories spiraled into stranger realms. Some suggested that radioactive materials had been used in the area, noting traces of radioactivity found on the hikers' clothing. Others attributed their deaths to hypothermia-induced paradoxical undressing, a known behavior in which victims of severe cold remove their clothing in a delirious attempt to cool down from perceived warmth. Still, some details resisted categorization, lingering like shadows that refused to be explained. Keith McCloskey, an investigator who visited the Dyatlov Pass in 2015, observed strange inconsistencies in the distances between the hikers' bodies, as though they had been moving with a purpose that remained lost in the snow. Even after all the theories and all the analyses, certain questions still hung in the air, unanswered. A lot of people have decided that these questions are simply unanswerable, that the Dyatlov group died, and that their secrets are now buried with them. But what if the truth has been right in front of us all this time? We'll never know. Thanks for unraveling this story with me. Be sure to like and subscribe because we always drop new mysteries on Fridays with Tony. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.